Alright, today instead of playing 4-player chess, we are going to be spectating 4-player chess. This is a rare time where 2,000 plus players, all in the top 20, are going. So I thought it would be a good opportunity to watch in preparation for the 4-player chess championships, which I will be participating in. So let's see what these guys do, if I agree with what they do or not, and if there's anything we can learn. So, standard opening. Get your pawns out to get your queens out. Yep. All standard here. Here the threat is this check and this check, so they block it. And then on this side, the threat is that check and that check, so instead of blocking this queen's attack, they move the bishop here, which can lead to some opportunities here where you do that check, and then you also check with one of your other pieces to make it mate. Green decides, okay, I got my queen out to threaten this pawn, but it's not really doing much anymore. Let's develop this knight, which is a fine move. Getting this knight out, this knight is always a good thing to get out because you have opportunities like this coming. Also, now this pawn is under attack, which could become relevant later. Now this queen comes out. It was obscured by this knight and this pawn. Well, first it was obscured by the pawn, and then he moved the knight there, because if the pawn's blocking it anyway, you might as well develop your knight. So now the queen's going to come out to try to get in the center and get in the attack. Yellow, yep, has these kind of ideas, and then green also gets the knight out. So, yeah, often when both sides get their knight out on the king side, this pawn comes up in order to go up another square. Now, the queen happens to be on this square, so the pawn can't move forward yet. But this is a very common occurrence. Usually, like, if I play queen here, and then pawn here, I can go pawn here. This knight covers this square, this knight covers this square. Their knight has to go away, and then this pawn becomes vulnerable. I can move my knight in. I can even move my queen in to get some kind of an attack. It's a strong idea. So you see these, I guess this K pawn. I think of it as the H pawn, but it's actually the K pawn. You see these come up pretty often. So for blue, comes up like this with so a mate threat is coming up on red, but this queen move actually stops it. So if this queen takes here, this yellow queen can take here, it'll pin this pawn, and there will no longer be mate. So there's no longer a mate threat on red, so we'll see what green does. But they can still do something like this for some kind of double attack, or get the pawn out like this. We'll see what happens. But now there's also the mate threat on blue here, with this coming in, and then something like this. Actually, it's not mate immediately, because the king can move over, but it's some sort of an idea that red and yellow can have. So we'll see from red if this bishop ends up coming like this to make this kind of a threat. It is a bit slow, but it's a possibility. Okay, so this pawn goes like this, so yeah, that queen move makes sense. Your queen's threatened, it's going to be moving anyway. Why don't you move it to a nice threatening square? So this would have threatened this, which I personally like more than what they did, but this is also a fine square. You can see ideas where this takes this pawn and this takes that knight if this queen ends up moving on later. Because, sure, this bishop is guarding this pawn, but because it's check, the bishop can't do anything about it. So that's going to be an interesting idea later on. So yeah, now the threat is takes and takes. So knight here is reasonable, knight here is reasonable, bishop here doesn't work because then this pawn would be under attack. Okay, yeah, knight there also works. Either way, you want to make sure that this pawn is no longer going to be under attack from yellow. Yeah, so now as you can see, yellow arrowing, this kind of an idea can come in handy to threaten this knight, get it out of the way, and then get an attack. So yes, yellow moves the pawn up. So now green, this queen isn't really doing much. You might want to activate it. I could see a move like this. This idea seems a bit slow to move the knight all the way out here that blue's suggesting. We'll see what happens. Yeah, so with the knight move there, this doesn't really become a threat because yellow can still go here, but instead of losing a knight, it'll just be a trade. So it's still kind of a threat. So because of that, red stops it, which I agree with. I agree with stopping it there. Because like right now, you're the team that went first. You should be having more pressure going on, so you should be the ones attacking. So blue comes in here, threatening this rook, but yellow can do something like this, and red can do something like this. We'll see what happens. Otherwise, for yellow, these pieces might want to start getting out. I can see a pawn move like this, because then this bishop comes on this pawn, it can come on this diagonal, threaten this. And like I said, you have ideas where you take the defender and then take the knight. Now for green looking for a queen trade here. Well, considering offering a queen trade here, does offer the queen trade. So I guess they think, okay, the opponents have a lot of pressure right now. Let's try to get the queens off the board and survive in the endgame, which I guess makes sense. You're going second. You're not going to have the best position. Queen trade would make sense in this kind of a situation. Okay, yeah, so red moving this knight out makes perfect sense because otherwise this rook is going to be vulnerable. So completely reasonable move. Red thinking quite a while here. I don't like using this much time, although I guess in the endgame, generally 15 seconds is enough per move, but there can be tactical situations where you want to spend more than your 15 seconds. Oh yeah, so I should touch on that. The time control is 1 minute, 15-second delay, so every move you can spend up to 15 seconds without any time penalty. So generally you'll want to do that. Well, not all the time, but pretty often you'll want to do that. Queen takes I13 and queen takes queen. So wanted to take there and then take there, but yellow could just take like this. So I don't know. I'm not quite sure what this move accomplishes. Maybe they see something I don't. But yeah, it just seems like you're losing this pawn. Or losing this knight. And you could have saved the knight, because there's no taking idea, because then the green queen would come and take. So, I don't know. An interesting knight sacrifice from Superatos. Yeah, unfortunately, well, fortunately, you can see the player's arrows. So if they're ever communicating, you can see, okay, this is what they're thinking. That's why they made that move. So I like that feature. But unfortunately, sometimes also people just spam arrows, and that's a bit annoying. Okay, so, okay, the idea was to take this pawn. Sorry, I forgot that this bishop moved out of the way, which made that pawn vulnerable. But yeah, now you see that green and blue can start ganging up on red here. So you're going to take this rook with check unless red does something about it. So bam, you just snap off this pawn. In the meantime, threaten this here. And yeah, red yellow have a couple choices. You can either move the rook here, try to defend this pawn, or you can just sack the exchange, get it out of the way, and give up the rook. So, but in that line, green could do something like this, and it doesn't look great, although yellow does have checks on green. So I don't know. I could see it either way, but when you don't have much time, this seems pretty safe. Okay. So right now they're threatening to take here and take here. So green will take with check, red won't be able to do anything about it, and bam, blue will snap off red's queen. So yeah, you had to either check there or defend the queen. They go for a check, which is reasonable, but now this pawn is under attack, so I don't love it. But because it's red's move next, red can go ahead and take here. So actually, yeah, that was correct. And in fact, this looks like a bit of trouble for blue-green here. Because, okay, it's check. So where's the king going to move? The king's going to go there, then bam, the queen snaps this off, the bishop snaps this off, and bam, you lost a queen. So yeah, that's why you don't want to go too low on time early. As you can see, Superatos has 1.5 seconds. So thought about that queen move, thought, okay, it looks like a decent idea, but didn't calculate it out fully, and guess what? You lost a queen. So yeah, now bishop takes here, bishop will take here, red will move the queen somewhere, and they'll have some compensation. You'll take this, you'll get some sort of a fork. This bishop is still under attack, so it'll probably have to move soon. It'll go somewhere like here or here. We'll see what happens, but you lost a queen. Now, it's worth noting that once one of the queens is traded, the being up a queen isn't that meaningful, but if you have both queens attacking, it's really strong. So, I could see a situation where blue-green still win this game. It's by no means over. Okay, yep, saves the queen, also threatens the knight. Good move. Yeah, for green, I like taking there. Or, sorry, for blue, I like taking there. Because
Oh, actually, there's something. Okay, it doesn't work, but there's an idea in general where one player on a team moves their piece, and the other player moves their piece, and bam, you get out of a pin. You actually reverse the pin. But here it doesn't work because green has a check on red. But yeah, that's a pretty neat idea that happens where they think they're pinning you, and bam, you get a discovered attack. So yeah, for green here, this bishop is hanging. Sorry, that knight is hanging and that bishop is hanging. You got to do something about it. Decides to say the bishop. Rez decides, okay, being in check is more trouble than it's worth. We're up a queen. There's no rush. Why would I take this knight? Let's just be safe. And oh yeah. So the threat there was blue would take, green would check, and then they would win the queen. So you actually have to get out of check there. So yeah, that's a good move by red getting out of check. Now they want to threaten some check ideas here. Probably this knight move will come into play. But yeah, then you lost this bishop that you just took with. So even if you win the queen back, you did lose quite a bit of material. So now this queen could come here so that if there's a check, you can answer it like that. Or you could just sack the queen outright. We'll see what they do. Yeah, I like just moving the queen there. So the idea earlier was takes and there, and then you'd snap off the queen. But now if you take, the queen can take, or the pawn can take, depending on what green does in this situation. Yeah, so for yellow, you want to get these pieces out. I could see knight here. I could see something like rook here. Both of those look reasonable. Also, you might want to get these pieces out at some point, because they're not really doing much right now. Okay, so he goes for rook here. Perfectly reasonable. Threaten a check on green. Get some sort of attack going. Red can have ideas like this where you threaten the knight. There might even be a pin involved if this bishop gets out of the way, and bam, you snap off this pawn. Okay, so the bishop does move out of the way, but it blocks this file. So there could be a pin coming up, but it won't be with check when you take this pawn. Okay, yep, queen takes knight. Perfectly fine. And now they're just up a queen. So it's looking pretty over. But this is four-player chess. Anything can happen. People can make all sorts of blunders. But one main idea in endgames, I'm going to say endgames, even though it may not look like one, this is an endgame relative to most of four-player chess. If you can get all of one side's pieces to die, then you're basically playing 2-on-1, and at that point it's over. Because the main tactical tricks are one person on a team makes a threat, another person on the team makes a threat, both on the same player. That player can't resolve both threats. They lose material. But if you get all of one player's pieces, that can't happen. So generally, you want to just simplify to the point where one team doesn't have any pieces left, and then you win. Okay, blue-green just trying to do something desperately, but it looks pretty over. So yeah, this queen move didn't calculate it out far enough. That's the thing about queen trades. Well, trades in general, but most specifically queen trades, is you think you can take back, but if there's any sort of check or any sort of attack that the other person can do, then you can lose material pretty quickly. But I say mostly queen trades because in a lot of other situations, the material isn't worth it. It's more important to have tempo. It's more important to have pieces on the board doing stuff. So often your opponents can go material grabbing all they want, but it doesn't actually lead to a good outcome for them. So you got to be careful about that. This game isn't about material. It's about going for mate. But once queens are off the board, then material is very important. So yeah, blue-green trying to get some faint idea of maybe doing some sort of tricks like this. But I think red and yellow are too good of players to allow something like that to happen. So you can take the knight here to threaten some sort of check like that. You could even check there immediately. Yeah, so he does take the knight. I agree with that. Now you have checks like this coming in, and if the king moves over, then this knight can come in with check, etc. So green will probably have to take on their next move. But like I said, blue is threatening this rook move here. So yeah, castle seems perfectly reasonable. Get your king nice and safe. Get it out of checks. And now I don't think blue-green will have any tricks left in their bag. So castles is pretty rare early on because like the queens will be on squares like this and this, doing attacks on these squares. So if you castle, often you're getting a weak square. Also, the way the board is, you just move the pawn like this, and bam, your fianchetto bishop is attacking the king. Or if the castle king side, bam, you go like this. Your bishop is attacking the king. The knights come like this, bam, they're attacking the king. So generally, castling doesn't make you that safe. So honestly, it's more often you see moves like this that red made, where the knight's coming like this, it's threatening a check, or a bishop's coming, it's threatening a check, and you end up moving the king one over to stop a check. That generally happens more often than castling. So if you're not used to 4-player chess, it can seem weird. Why aren't they castling? It's because it's not that good. Yeah, so now this is just totally over. We could see a resign here. Would be perfectly reasonable in my opinion. Yeah, so you just snap off that rook. Okay, now blue resigns. So yeah, the first queen trade offer worked out. Which queen trade offer was that? Yeah, this queen trade offer worked out, but this move did not, because your king's too vulnerable. You're not going to be able to take back, and bam, they lost the queen because of it. So yeah, you got to be really careful when offering trades in this game. But yeah, they had a nice attack going. They lost a piece, but they had this attack. Sorry, the queen was here, attacking the rook, attacking the pawn. It seemed like they had good compensation, but then just threw it all away with that queen move. So yeah, gotta be really careful. It's a very sharp tactical game, and even these 2000s can mess things up. I mean, I'm lower rated than most of these people, so I shouldn't say much, but I'm like as good as them. I don't think anybody here is that much better than anyone else, so I'm glad I could give some input on this game. Hopefully we get another game coming, because this guy's also 2000. This person says he has to leave, but this person is also 2000, so hopefully we get another game. Otherwise, I'm glad I could get a non-zero number of commentated games out there before the championship. I know I haven't uploaded most 4-player chess, but I haven't been able to talk much, so I haven't been able to upload Dominion either. Okay. Well, if there's another game, it'll be in another video. But for now, these guys are just like chatting after the game, so we'll end the recording here.